Captain Maya Cross gripped the cold, cracked console of the human vessel, her brow furrowed as she stared at the blinking readouts. The small exploration ship, an old, battered craft they had cobbled together after an emergency jump, was barely holding together. Power levels were dangerously low, and a sense of dread was beginning to settle over her crew. Outside, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, filled with stars too far to reach. "Status report," Maya said, her voice steady despite the fear building in her chest. "Power down to 5%, Captain," Marcus Webb, her chief engineer, replied. His fingers worked furiously at the control panel, but it was clear that they weren't going to make it much further. "We're not going to survive another confrontation with them. Their ship is too powerful." Maya clenched her jaw. She had always known the risks of space exploration, but this was beyond anything they had prepared for. The Vorak, the species they were facing, were one of the most advanced and ruthless in the galaxy. Humanity had barely made a mark on the stars when compared to the might of the Vorak, who had already subjugated entire worlds with their superior technology. Yet somehow they had stumbled upon this situation. Their tiny craft had drifted into the Vorak's territory, and now they had to find a way out. "Captain," Marcus continued, his voice tinged with frustration, "there's nothing left to try. Their weapons are designed to obliterate anything in their path. We can't outrun them, and our ship's defenses are non-existent." Maya's eyes drifted toward the viewport. The giant shadow of the Vorak warship loomed ominously in the distance, its sleek, angular design a testament to its power. It was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and shields that could vaporize anything in its path. There was no way they were going to outrun it, but Maya wasn't ready to give up, not yet. "We're not running, Marcus," she said, a cold fire burning in her chest. "We're not backing down." Behind her, Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's physician, was examining the crew's vitals. Lisa, ever the optimist, looked up from her scanner and gave Maya a nod of reassurance, though her eyes told a different story. The stress was taking a toll on everyone. They had been on the edge for days with no real hope of rescue. The Vorak had been hunting them for hours now. Maya could almost feel their presence looming over them like a predator. The Vorak were known for their cruelty, their efficiency. If they were captured, it would be worse than death, torture, experimentation, and enslavement would await them. But Maya had never been one to let fear dictate her actions. She had seen enough of space's horrors to know that there was always a way out, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. If she was going to survive this, she would have to think like a strategist. She would have to outthink the Vorak, play their game, and turn the tables before it was too late. "Everyone brace yourselves," Maya ordered, turning to her crew. "We're going to make them underestimate us. We're going to show them exactly what humanity is capable of." Marcus shot her a skeptical glance, but there was no time to explain her plan. The Vorak were closing in. Maya took a deep breath, her mind calculating every move. There had to be a way out. There always was. And if she was going to escape this, she'd have to outsmart the most dangerous species in the galaxy, starting now. Captain Maya Cross felt the ship shudder as the tractor beam of the Vorak warship latched onto their vessel. The hum of the beam's energy coursed through the hull, its power almost suffocating. Maya knew that there was no turning back now. The ship was being pulled toward the gargantuan, menacing form of the Vorak flagship, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Captain Marcus's voice crackled through the comms. "We're being drawn into their bay. We're done for." Maya remained silent for a moment, her hands gripped tightly around the console. Her mind raced, thoughts of escape, of fight, of surrender, all tangled together in an instant. But there was no fighting their way out. Not now, not against the Vorak. Their power was unmatched, their technology far superior to anything humanity had ever achieved. The best they could hope for was to survive long enough to gather some useful intelligence. The ship lurched again, this time more violently as the tractor beam anchored them firmly in the warship's hold. The control systems failed, blinking into darkness for a split second before flickering back to life. Maya's heart hammered in her chest, but she didn't let it show. She couldn't afford to. "Get ready, everyone," Maya said, standing straight, her voice cutting through the tension. "We're going to make them think we're compliant." As the ship was drawn closer to the Vorak warship, Maya felt an unsettling chill run through her. The bay doors of the massive ship slid open like the jaws of a predator, and they were pulled inside. The walls of the hangar bay were lined with sleek alien ships, each one far more advanced than anything humanity had built. Her ship, now a hunk of metal, seemed laughable in comparison. "We're docked," Marcus said flatly, not hiding his defeat. "This is it." The airlock hissed as it opened, and the cold, sterile atmosphere of the Vorak ship flooded their small vessel. Maya turned to face her crew, her eyes steely with determination. "Stay calm," she said. "Remember, we're not just here to survive, we're here to learn, and if we have to, we'll find a way to take them down." Her crew nodded in silent agreement. Dr. Park, Marcus, and the others were visibly exhausted, but Maya could see the spark of hope still alive in them. They were explorers, survivors. They could do this. The door slid open with a hiss, and the Vorak officers, towering and imposing, stepped into the bay, their mandibles clicking with cold amusement. Maya's heart beat faster as the alien creatures, glowing eyes, focused on her and her crew. "Welcome aboard, humans," said the Vorak captain, Corex. His voice was deep and mocking, the words slithering off his tongue like venom. "How quaint! You've arrived at the heart of the galaxy's might. Do you know who you're dealing with?" Maya stood tall, trying to appear unfazed by the sheer size and power of the Vorak. She had to project confidence. If they saw weakness, they would exploit it. "Greetings, Captain Corex," Maya said, her voice calm yet firm. "We are explorers, we mean no harm, we only seek knowledge." Corex snorted, his mandibles flaring in what Maya assumed was amusement. "Knowledge? Your vessel barely qualifies as a ship. What could you possibly offer us? You have no weapons, no shields, and your technology is laughable at best. You are nothing." Maya didn't flinch. She had expected the arrogance, the disdain. It was typical of the Vorak, but she wouldn't give in to it. "We might not have weapons, but we do have something more valuable," Maya replied. "We have the ability to learn, to adapt, and that's something you might find useful." Corex's eyes narrowed as he studied her. "Adapt," he said, clicking his mandibles in amusement. "We will see how well your species adapts once you've been brought to heel." "Bring them aboard," Corex commanded, gesturing toward his security detail. Maya's crew was swiftly escorted off their ship, their weapons and personal belongings confiscated. Maya kept her head high, but her mind was working fast. This wasn't over. She wouldn't let it be. The corridors of the Vorak ship were vast and imposing, the walls made of smooth, dark metal that seemed to absorb the light. The crew was led down long, featureless hallways by their captors, the sound of their footsteps echoing ominously in the cold silence. Maya felt the weight of their gazes on her. The Vorak were studying them, judging them. They were taken to a holding area, a cold, sterile room with no windows, no comforts. The door hissed shut behind them, and they were left alone in the silence. "Stay alert," Maya whispered, her voice low. "We need to keep our heads clear and think. This isn't over yet." The crew nodded, though they could hardly hide their exhaustion. Dr. Park was already checking on the crew's health, while Marcus went over the schematics of their ship in his mind, trying to figure out any weaknesses the Vorak might have exposed during the capture. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, his voice tired but determined. "We learn," Maya said, her tone hardening with resolve. "We learn everything we can about them, their ship, their systems, their weaknesses, and when the time is right, we'll make our move." They didn't know it yet, but Maya was about to do something no one would have ever expected. She was going to turn the Vorak's pride and arrogance into their greatest mistake. And it would start with the most unlikely ally, Corex, the very captain who thought he had won. As the hours stretched on inside the cold holding chamber, Maya Cross's mind raced. She had seen the Vorak warship up close, studied its technology, observed its crew. But now, more than ever, she realized just how underestimated her species was by the galaxy's dominant powers. The Vorak were powerful, no doubt, but they were also blind to the one thing humanity had that they could never understand: adaptability. The humans had been locked away in separate cells, isolated in an effort to prevent communication. But isolation wasn't a problem for Maya. It never had been. She'd seen the way her crew worked together even when separated. They were resourceful, skilled, and, most importantly, united. She just had to find a way to give them the space to act. Maya sat cross-legged on the floor of her cell, staring at the cold, featureless walls. A sudden sound, the faint hum of the ship's ventilation system, brought her back to reality. She had to act fast. The Vorak didn't see the bigger picture. They were so focused on their supposed superiority that they failed to notice the subtle ways in which Maya and her crew were gathering information. The door to her cell hissed open, and 2 Vorak guards entered. Maya rose to her feet, her movements slow and deliberate. The guards were massive, imposing, and almost predatory in their stature. their glowing eyes fixed on her as they moved forward, their scaly skin glistening in the harsh light of the hallway. "Captain Corex requests your presence," one of the guards said in a gravelly voice. Maya nodded and followed the guards down the sterile, metallic corridors. Her mind was already working, calculating every possible move. The Vorak might have been the galaxy's mightiest empire, but they had a glaring blind spot. They couldn't fathom the potential of a species like humanity, a species that had survived against all odds, that had risen from the ashes of its own mistakes. They believed themselves to be unstoppable, but Maya knew better. They arrived at a large, intimidating chamber. Captain Corex sat on his throne-like chair, his four glowing eyes fixed on the small human who had the audacity to challenge him. The room was filled with the hum of alien technology and the faintest metallic scent in the air. Maya stood tall, not a hint of fear in her expression as she met Corex's gaze. "So the translator returns," Corex said, his voice low and mocking. "Tell me, human, do you still believe you can survive this? Do you still think your pathetic species has any place in the galaxy?" Maya stood motionless, eyes locked onto his. "I believe that humanity has something you've never encountered before, something far more valuable than any weapon or technology." Corex let out a laugh, a deep rumbling sound that filled the chamber. "And what is that? Your adaptability, your ability to crawl through the dirt. You are nothing but weaklings. You'll bend to our will like every other species." Maya's lips curled into a small smile and she took a slow step forward. "You misunderstand us, Captain. It's not about technology. It's about thinking differently. While you've been focused on power, we've been focused on survival. We'll outthink you. We'll find a way to survive, and we will do it together." Corex narrowed his eyes. "You think I'm afraid of you, a human translator with your flowery words?" "No," Maya replied coolly. "I don't expect you to fear me, but I do expect you to underestimate us, and that will be your downfall." The Vorak captain leaned back in his chair, clearly intrigued but still not fully understanding. Maya had always been good at getting under people's skin. It was the diplomat in her. She knew how to make them think, to make them question things they had never questioned before. "I'm not sure if you're aware, Captain," Maya continued, her voice steady, "but your people are stuck. Your technology is impressive, yes, but it's also rigid. You don't adapt, you don't change." Corex's eyes flashed with irritation, but Maya pressed on. "And that's where you're wrong. It's not about technology or strength, it's about flexibility. The human mind is capable of more than you think. We don't need to dominate the galaxy. We just need to make our place in it, and we will, one step at a time." For a moment there was silence. Maya could see the wheels turning in Corex's mind. He was starting to get it, or at least, he was starting to wonder if he was missing something. But before he could respond, the door to the chamber hissed open again, and a voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain Corex, we have detected a malfunction in the ship's power grid. There are fluctuations in the auxiliary systems." Corex growled in frustration. "Again with the malfunctions?" he muttered to himself. "You would think with all our technology this wouldn't keep happening." Maya couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at the corner of her lips. She knew exactly what was happening. Her crew had been busy. While the Vorak were busy questioning their prisoners, they were laying the groundwork for something bigger. It was all part of the plan. Corex stood abruptly, his towering form casting a shadow over Maya. "I have no time for your games, human," he said. "You and your crew will be dealt with, but for now we'll see if your kind can fix what's broken on our ship. Perhaps you'll be more useful to us alive than dead." Maya's heart raced, but she kept her face impassive. "I'm sure I can find a way to help," she said, her tone deceptively calm. Corex sneered, gesturing for the guards to escort her. "See that you do, and remember, human, we are the future. You are nothing but a relic." As the guards led her out of the chamber, Maya's mind was already working. She had planted the seed of doubt. Corex was beginning to question his assumptions, and it was only a matter of time before that doubt turned into something bigger, something that would allow her crew to take control. Back in the holding area, the crew waited anxiously for Maya's return. The tension was palpable as they exchanged glances, trying to read each other's expressions. Dr. Park was packing, while Marcus sat at the back of the room, his brow furrowed in concentration. The door opened and Maya entered, her expression unreadable. "What happened?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "We're in," Maya said, her tone calm but with a glint of determination in her eyes. "It's time to move." The crew's eyes lit up with a mixture of relief and excitement. They had been waiting for this moment. Maya had given them the signal they needed. Now it was time to act. "We're going to take this ship," Maya said, her voice firm. "And we're going to do it together. We're not just going to survive, we're going to outsmart them, and we're going to make our own future." The next few hours felt like days. Maya's mind raced as she strategized, knowing that the time to act was fast approaching. Her crew, now on high alert, was ready. They had spent enough time observing the Vorak ship, learning its systems, its patterns, its routines. The key was patience. The key was knowing when to strike. Maya sat in her cell, her eyes focused on the ceiling. The ship's dim lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the walls. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving to the Vorak that humanity could not be underestimated, that they had more than just brute force to rely on. Her thoughts were interrupted by the faint hum of the door opening. 2 guards entered, flanking her. Maya stood slowly, her expression unreadable. "Captain Corex requests your presence again," one of the guards said, his voice rough. "Follow us." Maya nodded, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. She followed the guards through the twisting corridors of the Vorak warship, the low buzz of machinery surrounding her. As they reached the bridge, she could see Corex waiting for her, his large form seated in a command chair. His 4 glowing eyes locked onto her, a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "I hope you've been thinking about your situation, Miss Cross," Corex said, his voice thick with mockery. "Because I'm about to offer you a chance, an opportunity to survive. Tell me, do you really think your species can stand against the Vorak?" Maya kept her voice steady, her eyes meeting his with unwavering confidence. "I think we've already proven we can survive. We've made it this far, haven't we?" Corex's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Survival is not enough, human. Survival is an accident. You are in the presence of greatness. Do you not see that? Do you not understand the might of the Vorak?" Maya smiled slightly. "I understand one thing, Captain. The might of the Vorak is based on arrogance. Your strength is your weakness." Corex narrowed his eyes. "Arrogance, you say? Is that what you think of us?" "Not us," Maya replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Just you." The silence that followed was thick, and for the first time Maya saw a flicker of doubt in Corex's eyes. It was brief, but it was there. She had planted a seed. Now she just had to watch it grow. Back in the holding area, the crew was preparing for the next phase of their plan. Dr. Park, Marcus, and the others had been busy making modifications to the ship's systems, doing what they could with limited resources. Maya knew they couldn't wait any longer. The Vorak had their ship under tight surveillance, but it was still a large vessel, filled with complexities that even the Vorak didn't fully understand. It was their greatest strength and their greatest flaw. Maya's communicator buzzed softly in her pocket. She pulled it out and read the message from Marcus. "We're ready, the systems are in place, we need to move now." Maya looked up at the guards standing outside her cell. She had already mapped the layout of the ship in her mind, and she knew it was only a matter of time before they were caught. But she wasn't concerned about that. She had already calculated her next move. An hour later, the alarms blared. The ship was under attack. Maya's heart raced as she sprinted down the narrow hallway. She had known the moment would come, but it was still a shock to hear the alarms blaring across the ship. Her crew had executed their part of the plan to perfection. Now it was time to play her part. "Corex, you are about to learn what happens when you underestimate humanity," Maya muttered to herself as she slipped through the shadows, her mind racing with anticipation. On the bridge, Corex stared at the rapidly flashing alerts on his control screen, his mandibles clicking in alarm. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice rising with frustration. "Sir," Zella, the communications officer, said, her voice tight with stress. "There's a breach. The humans have gained access to the ship's central control systems. We've lost access to the lower decks. They're sabotaging our power grid." Corex's eyes widened in disbelief. How could they have bypassed our security protocols? "I don't know, sir," Zella replied, her voice strained. "It seems like they've been planning this for some time. We're being locked out of key systems." Corex slammed his fist on the console. "This is impossible. How are they doing this?" But Corex knew the answer. Maya Cross had outsmarted him. She had used their arrogance against them. She had studied their systems, their behavior, their weaknesses, and she had exploited them. Back in the cargo hold, Maya and her crew were moving quickly. The walls of the ship seemed to close in on them as they navigated the complex maze of corridors. They had infiltrated the ship's lower levels, bypassing security and overriding the access protocols. "Everything's going according to plan," Marcus said as he worked furiously on the control panel. "The system's almost ours." "Good," Maya replied. "But we need to make sure we have access to the weapons. We can't afford to be caught off guard." "Already on it," Marcus said. "We've got the schematics, just a few more adjustments." On the bridge, Corex's anger reached a boiling point. The alarms were louder now, and the flashing red lights cast an eerie glow over the control room. He stood, his enormous form towering over the crew as he scanned the screens. The ship was falling apart around them, and the humans, these pitiful, fragile creatures, were responsible. "Do not underestimate them again," he growled, his voice filled with venom. "They've already won," Vex, his second-in-command, said quietly. "We've lost control." Corex's mandibles clicked furiously. "No, not yet. We still have the advantage. I will not let a group of humans defeat us." But deep down, Corex knew the truth. His empire, the empire he had worked so hard to build, was crumbling, and it was all because of one human. One translator who had outsmarted him at every turn. Back on the lower decks, Maya smiled as the systems finally clicked into place. The ship was theirs. She had known from the beginning that this was the only way to defeat the Vorak. They had all underestimated her, and now they would pay the price. The Vorak believed they were the future, but Maya and her crew had just shown them that humanity was no longer the weak, insignificant species they had once been. They were survivors, innovators, creators. And now they would take their place in the galaxy, not as pawns, but as equals. The ship's systems were a chaotic mess. Alarms rang out from every corner, warning of failing systems, breached protocols, and internal malfunctions. Maya felt a rush of adrenaline surge through her as she and her crew moved with precision through the corridors. This was it, the final push. They had dismantled the Vorak's carefully constructed order from the inside out, and now they were ready to take back the ship. "Status," Maya whispered into her communicator, trying to keep her voice steady despite the growing chaos around them. "Power grid is down in most sectors, Captain," Marcus's voice crackled through. "We're on backup systems, but it's enough to keep us going. I've locked out the core control functions. They're flying blind. Now it's just a matter of taking control of the weapons." Maya's heart skipped a beat. Weapons. If they could secure those, the Vorak would have no chance of regaining control. She had to make sure that her crew, despite being outnumbered, had the upper hand. The ship might be their cage for now, but it was also their key to survival. As they moved, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. Dr. Park was tending to a few minor injuries sustained during their initial breach, but her focus remained unwavering. Alex Stone, the geologist, was examining the walls and floor, noting how the ship's structural integrity was beginning to fail in certain areas. The Vorak had relied too heavily on their technological superiority and hadn't expected humans to fight back like this. Maya's mind was sharp, calculating every step. They had to be swift, as the Vorak were powerful and quick to react when faced with their first real threat in ages. But the humans, her crew, were no longer helpless. This was the moment they had been waiting for. "We're at the weapons bay," Marcus said, his voice tinged with relief. "Ready to breach." "Good," Maya replied, voice low and determined. "You know what to do. Take control, but don't engage unless we have to." The silence in the hallway was deafening as they waited for Marcus to give the signal. Maya's eyes locked with Dr. Park, a silent agreement passing between them. This was about survival now, not just for them but for humanity. No one could underestimate the resolve of the human spirit. The seconds dragged on, then, boom! The sound of the breach echoed through the corridor. Maya's heart raced as the security doors to the weapons bay were blown open, a wave of sparks cascading down the walls. Marcus and Alex rushed in, their movements swift and calculated. The Vorak security systems had been overwhelmed. Inside, the weapons bay was filled with the unmistakable hum of advanced technology. Weapons, shields, and defense systems stood ready, waiting for a commander who wouldn't arrive. The crew was quick to work, with Marcus and Alex taking charge of the ship's armament systems. "Powering up," Marcus reported. "Weapons systems are online. We have full access, Captain." "Good work," Maya said, her voice steady despite the storm of activity around them. "Now let's make sure we hold it." Meanwhile, on the bridge, Corex paced furiously, his mind racing. The humans had somehow managed to bypass all of his security protocols and now controlled the lower decks of the ship. His ship. The Vorak Empire was built on absolute control, and now that very control was slipping through his fingers. Captain, Vex said, her voice tight with urgency. The humans have disabled our power core functions. We've lost access to essential systems. Their sabotage is spreading. Corex clenched his fists, his claws scraping the floor beneath him. His mandibles clicked in frustration. Impossible. They're just humans. They should be afraid. Why are they so resourceful? Vex's expression remained unreadable, but her tone softened with something akin to pity. Perhaps it's because they've been underestimated. Corex froze, his gaze snapped to her, fury in his eyes. Underestimated? We are Vorak, we are perfection. But Vex didn't flinch. You thought they were simple prey, Captain, but they are more than that. They're survivors, they adapt, and they've learned how to fight back. Corex stared at the flickering screens, his mind trying to piece together the puzzle he had missed. How could he have been so blind? He had dismissed these humans as weak, but now they were taking everything from him. Lock down the entire ship, he snapped, his voice filled with venom. Activate security lockdown, shut down all communications. I will not let them steal this victory from us. Vex didn't move. She remained rooted to her spot, staring at Corex with a mix of disbelief and pity. Captain, it's already over. They've won. Corex's eyes burned with anger, his mandibles clicking loudly in the dead silence of the room. We'll see about that. Back in the lower decks, Maya's crew was assembling. With the weapons now under their control, the next phase of their plan was already in motion. The ship was theirs. They had turned the Vorak's own technology against them. The tide had shifted. Now Maya just needed to make sure they kept it that way. Maya looked over her crew. Each one of them had proven themselves in ways she never could have imagined. Dr. Park had tended to the wounded with precision. Marcus had re-engineered systems that the Vorak thought were impenetrable. Alex, though a geologist by trade, had shown unparalleled adaptability in the face of danger. They were ready. Time to send a message, Maya said. Let's take back the ship for humanity. Her crew nodded, a silent promise between them that nothing would stop them now. They made their way to the command center. With the weapons systems in their hands, it was only a matter of time before the Vorak were overwhelmed. Every second counted. Maya felt the weight of the mission settle over her, but she didn't let it sway her. This was no longer about survival. It was about sending a message. To the Vorak, to the galaxy. Humanity would no longer be underestimated. On the bridge, Corex's eyes burned with frustration as he watched the humans take control of his ship. His once proud vessel, his empire's crown jewel, was being torn apart from the inside out. It was as if they had anticipated every move, every flaw in his defenses. And now, the ship that had once symbolized his power was being turned against him by the very species he had thought beneath him. Corex, Vex's voice cut through his thoughts. They've reached the command center. Corex turned to face her, his fury building. It's not over yet. I will not let them win, not after everything we've built. But deep down, he knew it was too late. The humans had already outsmarted him, and now the ship, his ship, was theirs. Back in the heart of the ship, Maya and her crew stood in front of the command center doors. The control panels buzzed with life, flashing red with warnings. They could hear the faint sounds of struggle in the distance, the remnants of the Vorak's efforts to regain control. But it didn't matter. The battle had already been won. Maya turned to her crew. This is it, the moment we've been waiting for. Let's show them what happens when you push humanity too far. With a steady hand, she pressed the control panel, and the doors slid open. Inside, the bridge was dim, the control consoles flickering as sparks flew from damaged circuits. The Vorak crew was scattered, disorganized, and defeated. Corex stood at the center of it all, his imposing form barely a shadow in the chaos. But his eyes met Maya's with an intensity that burned through the wreckage. You think you've won? Corex growled, his voice filled with venom. This ship is ours, it always has been. Maya stepped forward, her posture unyielding. Not anymore. This ship, this empire, is now under the control of humanity. Corex stared at her, his mandibles clicking, the realization settling over him. His defeat wasn't just physical. It was a moral blow that would resonate throughout the galaxy. Maya smiled, her eyes burning with the promise of change. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you underestimate humanity. And with that, she pressed the final button, sealing the fate of the Vorak warship. The silence on the bridge was deafening. Captain Maya Cross stood at the center of the Vorak command station, her eyes sweeping over the wreckage of the once proud warship. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows across the room, highlighting the damage that had been done. The crew of the Vorak flagship, once so confident in their superiority, now stood scattered, disoriented, and for the first time, vulnerable. Maya turned to face her crew, who had made their way to the bridge, securing the control panels and securing their positions. They had done the impossible. They had taken control of the ship. "Status report," Maya said, her voice steady, though her heart raced with adrenaline. She could feel the weight of the moment, the enormity of what they had just accomplished. "We have full control of the ship's systems, Captain," Marcus Webb said, his voice calm, though it was clear the tension of the moment hadn't entirely lifted. "Weapons are offline, but the ship's engines are still functional. We can move." Maya nodded. They were still at the heart of the Vorak fleet. Taking control of the warship was one victory, but getting away without drawing attention to themselves was the next challenge. "Good, prepare to move out," she ordered. "But no sudden movements. We don't need to attract any more attention. We're taking this ship and getting out of here, but we need a clean getaway." "Understood," Marcus replied, tapping at the control panel. "It'll take a few minutes to bring the engines online and make sure we're not sending out any signals to their fleet." Maya turned back to the Vorak captives who had once been her captors. They were subdued, confused, and defeated. Korex, the once proud captain, stood at the far end of the bridge, his massive form slumped in defeat. His mandibles clicked quietly, a stark contrast to the fierce pride they had once displayed. "You were warned," Maya said, her voice cool. "You thought humanity was nothing, you thought we were weak, but look at you now. Your ship is ours, your empire is fractured." Korex glared at her, but there was no fire in his eyes. He knew deep down that Maya was right. They had been caught off guard. The Vorak, for all their power, had underestimated humanity, and now they were paying the price. "You may have won this battle, human," Korex growled, his voice strained with humiliation. "But we will rise again. The Vorak do not fall so easily." Maya's eyes softened for a moment. She could feel the weight of what had happened, but she also knew it was just the beginning. The Vorak had been a powerful force in the galaxy, but their time was coming to an end, and humanity would be the catalyst for that change. "We will see about that," Maya replied, turning her back on the fallen captain. "But for now, this ship belongs to us, and we're going to make sure it's the start of something new." The ship's engines roared to life, their power shaking the hull as it slowly began to pull away from the Vorak fleet. Maya stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes focused on the control panel, but her mind was far from the ship. She was thinking of what lay ahead, the larger mission, the message they had just sent. Humanity was no longer a quiet, weak species hiding in the shadow of the galaxy's giants. They had shown their strength, their ingenuity, and their ability to adapt under the most extreme conditions. Now they had a ship that belonged to them, and with it, they had the potential to change the fate of the galaxy. "Maya," Marcus said, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "The fleet is still tracking us. We've got to make a decision. We can't outrun them with our current power output. If they send reinforcements, we're going to be overwhelmed." Maya turned to him, her gaze sharp. "We're not running. We've already shown them that humanity is capable of more than they can imagine. Now we need to prove that we can stand as equals among the stars." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "We're going to take the fight to them," Maya said, her voice steady and determined. "We've got their ship, we know their weaknesses, and now we're going to use everything we've learned to turn the tables. It's time we show the Vorak what happens when they underestimate us." Back in the lower decks, Maya's crew was busy securing the ship's weapons systems, repurposing what they could from the Vorak technology. They had made modifications to the ship, and now it was time to put it to use. The crew was focused, determined, and most of all, united. They weren't just fighting for their lives anymore. They were fighting for something bigger, the future of humanity in the galaxy. Dr. Park was reviewing medical protocols, ensuring that the crew would be able to survive whatever came next. Alex Stone was working alongside Marcus to optimize the ship systems, making sure that every weapon, every engine, every piece of technology worked as efficiently as possible. It wasn't just about surviving the next fight. It was about making sure they were ready for whatever would come next. "Maya," Dr. Park called, approaching her as she stood by the view screen looking out at the stars. We've got a secure communications line with our fleet. It's weak, but it's enough to send a distress signal. We can call for backup." Maya turned toward her, a small, calculating smile on her face. "We don't need backup." Dr. Park stared at her, confused. "But we're outnumbered. The Vorak are relentless. If we don't get help soon, we're going to be trapped." Maya shook her head. "We don't need help. We have everything we need right here. We've already shown the galaxy that we can stand against the Vorak. Now it's time to show them that we don't need anyone to save us. We can save ourselves." As the ship continued to glide through the vast emptiness of space, Maya Cross stood at the helm, her eyes focused on the distant stars. She had led her crew through the impossible. They had taken the fight to the Vorak and won, but this was just the beginning. Humanity was no longer the prey, they were the hunters. The galaxy had just learned that humanity was no longer to be underestimated. And Maya Cross had made sure of it. The hum of the ship's engines was steady now, almost rhythmic, as the stolen Vorak flagship sliced through the quiet of space. Maya Cross stood at the helm, her posture straight, her mind fully immersed in the enormous responsibility she now carried. The warship's control systems, once foreign and complex, had become their tool. They had captured the heart of an empire, and now it beat to the rhythm of humanity's will. The crew had settled into their new roles, becoming more than just survivors. They were becoming a force of change, carving their place in a galaxy that had long underestimated them. Humanity, once small and fragile, had now taken its first true step into the cosmos, and Maya knew there was no turning back. "Maya," Marcus's voice crackled through the comms, "we're coming up on the Vorak fleet. They've shifted their positions. Looks like they're preparing for another strike." Maya's grip tightened on the controls. The Vorak were predictable in their arrogance. They couldn't imagine that anyone could stand against them, especially not a species as primitive as humanity. But now they were about to learn just how wrong they were. "Bring us into position," she ordered. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for reinforcements. We'll make our own path forward." Her crew was already at work, adjusting the ship's systems to their specifications. They had upgraded the weapons, repaired the power grid, and adapted the Vorak technology to suit their needs. Now it was time to test their modifications. Humanity would no longer rely on the mercy of superior forces. They would create their own fate. On the bridge, the Vorak fleet loomed large on the display screens, a collection of imposing ships that seemed to stretch on forever. But Maya didn't flinch. She had the advantage now. The Vorak might have more ships, but they were not prepared for the kind of attack she had in mind. "Marcus, deploy the secondary shields," she commanded. "And prepare the energy cannons. I want the Vorak to know we're not afraid." Marcus's hands flew over the console, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Shields up. Weapons are ready." "Let them come," Maya murmured under her breath. "Let them see what happens when they push humanity too far." On the Vorak flagship, Corex paced in frustration, his eyes burning with the same fury that had driven him to dominate countless species. But this was different. These humans, these weaklings, had taken his ship. They had taken everything from him, and now they were on the verge of escaping with it. "Sir," Vex's voice came from behind him. "The humans have activated their weapons. They're targeting us." Corex froze, his mind struggling to process the impossible. "Targeting us?" he echoed, the words foreign to his ears. "That's not possible. They're just humans." "Apparently not," Vex replied with a dark chuckle. "We're dealing with something else here, Captain. They've adapted. They've learned." Corex's mandibles clicked, his anger building. "Prepare for a counterattack. This is not how it ends, not with them in control." But Corex's words fell flat. In truth, he was beginning to realize that the battle was already over. The humans were no longer the weak prey he had thought them to be. They had become a force, one that could not be ignored. Back on the stolen ship, Maya stood tall, her eyes fixed on the approaching Vorak fleet. The moment had arrived. She had spent her entire career learning how to navigate the delicate politics of diplomacy, but now, for the first time, diplomacy was no longer enough. She would show the Vorak that humanity was not to be trifled with. "Full power to the weapons," Maya commanded. "Target their weak points. We'll make sure they remember who we are." The ship surged forward, its weapons locking onto the Vorak fleet. The hum of energy filling the air was almost deafening as the cannons powered up. The Vorak, once masters of the stars, were now the ones under attack. With a loud explosion, the first energy blast fired. It struck the nearest Vorak ship, sending shockwaves through its hull. The impact was devastating. The Vorak were thrown into disarray, their communications scrambling in an attempt to counter the human assault. Maya gritted her teeth as the battle intensified. "Stay focused, everyone. We've only just begun." Back in the heart of the Vorak fleet, Korex watched in disbelief as the humans' attack took its toll. Their ship was smaller, less advanced, yet their tactics were unlike anything he had expected. The energy blasts were not just powerful, they were precise, hitting vital systems in a way that would take down even the most powerful warships. He slammed his fist onto the console. "What are they doing? How can they know our weak points?" His voice was a low growl, the frustration evident. Vex, standing nearby, kept her voice calm. "They're using our arrogance against us. They've learned everything we've taught them, Captain, and now they're turning it back on us." Korex felt the weight of her words sink in. The Vorak had always believed that they were the apex predators in the galaxy. They had never had to deal with a species like humanity before, and now they were paying the price for their complacency. "Prepare for the final assault," Korex ordered, but the words lacked the conviction they once had. "We'll crush them, we have to." But even as he gave the orders, he knew that the situation was spiraling out of his control. The humans had outsmarted him, and now they had the upper hand. Maya stood at the helm of the ship, her eyes locked on the chaotic battle unfolding around them. The Vorak were scrambling to regain control, but it was too late. The tide had turned, and humanity was now the force to be reckoned with. Her crew had done it. They had taken the fight to the Vorak and proven that humanity was not to be underestimated. "Captain," Marcus's voice broke through the comms. "The Vorak flagship is retreating. We've neutralized their weapon systems. They're falling back." Maya allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. "Let them retreat," she said, her voice calm. "The battle is ours, but this is just the beginning." She turned her gaze back to the crew, each one of them standing ready, knowing that they had just secured a victory that would ripple through the galaxy. But the war wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Vorak might retreat for now, but humanity had made its mark. And soon the galaxy would realize that they were no longer just survivors. They were a force that would change everything. As the ship drifted away from the remnants of the Vorak fleet, Maya stood at the viewport, gazing out into the stars. The battle had been won, but she knew there was still much to do. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless threats, alliances, and opportunities. But for the first time in human history, humanity wasn't just part of the galaxy's backdrop. They had become central players. "This is only the beginning," Maya said to herself, her voice steady, her resolve unshaken. And as the stolen Vorak ship sailed into the unknown, she knew one thing for sure. Humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured. They would rise, adapt, and claim their rightful spot among the stars. The future was theirs.